total nefes mera was scared.
They society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me.
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
I was just getting rid of it, so I went to the garage. I've got an ex.
Shh. I closed my eyes.
Suspicious activity.
I was crying so hard. And all of a sudden he was there.
It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
I am a human being and a killed human being. Dead more body. It's the living you're going to worry about.
Good evening, everybody. In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, Profiler Africa has become the space where we unpack the psychology and the science behind violent crime. And tonight, for the first time ever, we are, in a very meaningful way, stepping outside of Africa. And we are going global here at Profiler Africa because violent crime really does know no borders, and the psychology of offenders is as relevant in Johannesburg as it is in Los Angeles, Boston, or Phoenix. The story that we're going to be covering tonight takes us to the United States and the chilling case of serial arsonist Justin Caruso. From Massachusetts to Texas to Arizona, his fires weren't random. They were staged, disguised as accidents, and sometimes deadly. We are going to have retired LA sheriff's arson and bomb detective and one of the world's top arson investigators joining us once again tonight. We had him on the show just a few weeks ago recently, and he promised to come back and take us through a real deep dive into one of his cases. And tonight we've got an absolute doozy for you. Before we say hi to Ed, though, let's say hi to Gérard. Good evening, Gérard. Nice to be back. We missed everyone last week.
Yeah, everybody, sorry about that, but work, unfortunately, sometimes does take preference over YouTube channels. So I was in Los Angeles for a threat assessment conference, a very busy week, as it always tends to be. So thanks for your guys accommodating our absence last week.
Yeah, fantastic. We'd like to remind everyone tonight, as we go through tonight's case, we've got, like I say, really one of the world's leading arson investigators with us. So an absolute treat for you guys and the opportunity to ask your questions, post your comments as we go. So please do that on the chat. If you have not yet subscribed to the page, why? Please do so and hit the like button if you enjoyed tonight's episode. And if you hit the bell, you will get a little reminder every time we post new content. Now, tonight's case, Gérard, we welcome, like I say, our special guest, Ed Nordskog, retired LA Sheriff's arson and bomb detective, one of the world's top arson investigators. Ed has worked directly on the Caruso case and brings us the inside story tonight of how investigators finally connected the fires, his motives, and his disturbing need to be seen as a hero. So lots to it. Let's unpack. Let's say hi to Ed. Good evening, Ed, joining us all the way from Los Angeles. It's lovely to have you.
Good evening, Paul and Gérard. Thank you. Good evening.
Okay, so tonight, Ed, you're going to be taking us through the case of Justin Caruso. Now, to set the scene, and we've got a lot to get through, so we're going to dive straight into it tonight. To set the scene, there are, as we understand it, there are a couple of kind of complications here. And it's something that we've covered on the channel a number of times. When we talk about cases in South Africa, we talk about our centralized police service and the fact that, if a case happens in different parts of the countries, that those can be handled by our unit. But here, as I understand it, you have cases happening in multiple states, which becomes a complication. And then we have the subject suffered from Asperger's as well, which we'll also find out became a challenge. But Ed, maybe the way to start off, just to kind of contextualize for us and explain to us why that immediately is challenging in a scenario like this, and then we will jump into the case and go through it in detail.
Well, in this case, Asperger's is a special needs, and it's actually somewhat common amongst serial arsonists. So that's probably why they reached out to me. Arson in the United States is a general intent crime, and we do prosecute people with special needs on occasion for that, depending on the case. However, this individual, as you'll find out, caused a fatality, a death with one of his fires. And I wasn't brought in until after he was arrested. I am a profiler, so I didn't have anything to do with the original investigations. But I was brought in to look at this person's case as an overall event going back several years. And once a fatality happens, now it's a legal question of murder or manslaughter or something like that. And now his special needs become a actual legal question of what can we do with this? What should we do with it? And I'm there to advise the attorneys in the courts and talk about how sophisticated or unsophisticated this person's actions are. And that's how we look at cases like this. We understand our special needs, and that's going to be a factor, but let's look at the actions this person did and try and pull information out of those actions.
Okay. Gérard, have you got any comments just on Asperger's in general from your perspective? Or
Yeah, look, I mean, it's definitely not my area of specialization, so please take whatever I say with a pinch of salt, but it's a neurodivergence issue. It's sort of on the autism spectrum. People have, they obsess about things. They have repetitive behaviors and routines. They have a lot of difficulty relating to other people, and you'll see that in terms of eye contact, etc., and not necessarily very abstract in their thinking. So, but obviously the majority of people with health issues, whether it's Asperger's or schizophrenia, are not violent people by nature. But of course, it can influence people's behaviors, as I'm sure we're going to see here, how it didn't play a role in this case. And typically, legally, the mere fact that you have a diagnosis does not mean you're not responsible for your behavior. At least in South African law, there has to be a link between the criminal act and that diagnosis. So you could have schizophrenia, but if you go and steal a chocolate because you just didn't have money to pay for it, you knew it was wrong, the schizophrenia is not going to get you out of jail free. So you always, and I would assume it's the same in the States, there has to be some connection between the mental illness and the crime, and then how much did it influence the behavior? Is it something that's going to make the person not responsible at all, sort of not guilty by reason of insanity? Or is it something that's just going to be factored in for sentencing that we would treat the person differently? So I'm sure as this unfolds, we're going to hear more about how it actually played a role.
Okay, so let's jump into it then, Ed. I mean, guys, I just want you to understand that we are really lucky tonight because Ed has only presented this, presented this case in a couple of places prior to tonight, only to his colleagues and professionals in his, in his business, if you like. So it really is a rare treat that we're going to have tonight as we go through this. So I'm going to jump into the presentation here, Ed, and then perhaps you just want to set the scene or start where you would typically start. So here we go.
Okay, so the photo you're looking at his name is Justin Caruso, is Justin's very last fire. And in this fire, he lived 2 houses away, and he risked the life of a young family and their infant child who escaped. But he set a building adjacent to their house on fire, and they escaped. So that's the scene. The difficulty, I was brought in after his arrest, and by this very cool map you have here, like the upper right-hand circle is the state of Massachusetts on our upper East Coast. And this is where a lot of Justin grew up in Massachusetts. Interview him, he has a very thick Boston accent. If you're from America, you would understand that. So he's actually difficult to interview, and he drinks a lot. So that makes it even more difficult. I've heard many interviews of him, and it's actually quite difficult to understand him. He moves eventually to Arizona in the far left lower corner of this map. And a fatality fire eventually occurs there. And right after that, he moves to Texas and sets a nearly identical, almost fatality fire. And then he flees back to Massachusetts and is eventually arrested. I was brought in after these arrests by the prosecutors who ran this case in Arizona. They were considering prosecuting him for this fatality fire. And I was brought in to look at all his fire scenes years after they occurred. because I practice what Gérard practices, which is investigative psychology, studying an offender by their actions at crime scenes. And in doing so, I found out that he was actually involved in burglaries as well and some other things, like calling emergency calls to the police and fire services. And those are actually part of the overall arc of behavior of this individual. And so I brought in those cases as well to look at. His burglaries are very much like his arsons, except no fire. Okay, so if we go down and look at our offender, he's already been arrested. He's out on bond pending them deciding how to process him at all. You'll see my last note at the bottom of this screen says openly gay. A lot of people are going to wonder, why is that germane to this discussion? He is in fact a serial arsonist, and sexual identity is incredibly important among serial arsonists and a few other offenders. And that actually plays into some of the profiling work that I do and other people like me do. So it's important to me. It may not be important to anybody else, but it is important to analysts and profilers. So let's look at his first event. When the prosecutor asked me to get involved in looking at him, I said, I want to know everything you know about him from the day he was born. This appeared to be his overriding motive. We don't generally look at motives first on any offender, but in this case, we're looking at his motives for why he might be doing some of this stuff. He is many of his relatives are firefighters, and due to some legal issues and his physical health and his mental health, he was never able to be a firefighter, which is what he wanted to be his entire life. His cousins are firefighters. Several members of his family are firefighters. He clearly was drawn to that, as you'll see from some of his social media. And he is one of the few serial arsonists I've met who actually wanted to be a hero. And so that appears to be one of his driving motives, his main driving motive is to appear as a hero. So the investigators on the case went back into his teens and they interviewed his friends. So we do this a lot in this business. For frequent fire setters, we want to know about their childhood. He was born with some issues, some mental health issues. He was diagnosed fairly early as being special needs or possibly autistic, possibly Asperger's. And he went to schools, special schools for that in the United States. His family dealt with that. No other members of his family were like that. But he was a functioning person. He went to school. He could drive a car. He actually held jobs. But they found out early in his childhood, from maybe age 8 to 12, he was actually setting fires in the forest behind his homes. There's no police record of that, but his childhood friends said that. Here's the first in 2011, in his young 20s, he sets this large pile of cut wood on fire at a camping area near his home. And so now this is where you start to look at consistent behavior. And Gérard mentioned about some of these offenders that they are obsessive, and their behaviors become consistent over and over again. Maybe the fact is not the same, but the behaviors leading up to it are consistent. And one of his behaviors is he can't sleep, which is very common amongst a lot of serial arsonists. So he tends to drink at night a lot. He is clearly a functioning alcoholic. And even as a young man, he drank to the point of just passing out. So that's a consistent behavior. The time of night is consistent. It's 2 a.m. Prior to this event, he walked over with a friend. They saw this pile of downed timber, and they said, boy, that would make a big fire someday if somebody ever set that on fire. And that conversation occurred a few hours before 2 a.m. And he apparently set this pile of timber on fire with some gasoline. He was drunk at the time, and he wandered back to his tent and sort of mentioning that there's a big fire outside to his friends. I'm explaining this one because he did the same thing over and over and over. He discovers a fire in the middle of the night. He's drunk, drinking. he wanders back and reports it to his friends or neighbors, and then has them notify the authorities. So he's not the one who notifies the authorities in many of these, but almost always the first person to report it. He took a picture after the event. And so now we're looking at pre-fire behavior, the drinking, the wandering around at night, setting the fire, and now post-fire behavior. He almost always returned to the scenes, took photos, and eventually posted that on social media with his comments. I know it's difficult to read what he says, but eventually, years later, he reposted on his original post and said, "This is the best fire I lit ever." And that's pretty good information for somebody like me looking back 15 years later at his actions. And he's bragging about this to friends. So the behavior, the fire behavior is just as important. He revisits the scenes. He actually starts talking to the firefighters and park rangers, and so he puts himself into the investigation, if you will. And this is a behavior that's repeated for the next decade, over and over. Those same three behaviors.
If I may,
That's the sort of stuff. Go ahead.
setting a fire in this kind of environment, I mean, is it okay to, in this part of the world, just, set a big fire outdoors? What are the immediate kind of legal issues here?
Well, that would be an act of arson in the United States and pretty much everywhere else.
Okay.
It was in a time of the year in an area where it wasn't going to spread, but that doesn't matter. It was a large fire, quite large fire in a forested area. And had he been seen doing that, he would have been arrested and prosecuted for arson of the woodlands or wildlands. And now with, of course, the global temperature change issues, those are even drier than they were 15 years ago. So any act like that could be a devastating fire.
So, absolutely. So, yeah. Okay. So where is the line where you go from like bonfire to dangerous event?
That's a great question. A bonfire, most places like that was on a parkland. All fires have to be within a camping spot or a fire circle, a fire ring. This is clearly a pile of downed timber from a logging operation, and that would lead to a wildfire. So that's not a bonfire that a bunch of people are having a party around. In most places in the United States, if you want a bonfire, you have to get a permit from the local fire marshal.
Okay.
And they say, well, the weather's not right for a bonfire. You go get a permit I don't think it costs anything, but this would not have been allowed, this sort of event.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we go faster, and his friends are talking to him. And he's talking to his best friend here in a text, and it doesn't really matter. It's hard to read some of his words. Not a good speller, of course. And his best friend's calling him a pyro, of course, spelling it wrong. And his best friend is this kid named Ryan. And it's important to notice that 4 years later, Justin would attempt to burn Ryan's home down while he's staying there. So he doesn't spare his friends. This is his best friend in life. And so they're joking back and forth about, wow, you're such a pyro, meaning, you're a pyromaniac, you're starting fires. And because his friend Ryan eventually figured out that he was responsible for a lot more fires. And so this is good information for investigators to find years later. Once it's on digital, it's there forever.
I'm just going to bring in a quick question here, just from Marlene, who's on the chat with us. She's asked, was he on any medications which may have clashed with the use of alcohol?
Absolutely. Fantastic question. So when we do backgrounds on all serial offenders, arson in my case, and their medications are extremely important. And he is on various medications. At various times, they changed. But alcohol, he mixed those with alcohol, which of course is going to cause erratic behavior. And there's indications that he smoked marijuana on occasion as well. But alcohol is his main drug, but he was certainly taking various mental health related medications. So yes, that's a great question. I find that in all the serial arsonists that I look at, virtually every one of them is mixing medications with alcohol or illegal narcotics.
Okay.
Very common.
All right. Thank you for that,
Question.
Pauline. Okay, and we are on to our next slide then. So, and more bragging.
All right, so I included all these pictures that Justin posts of himself online. He considers himself a bit of a clown because he's usually drunk when he's posting, and there's videos that he posts where he's clearly drunk. And now they're bragging a long time later about the size of this fire, so that's information for investigators. So bragging online, this is one of his post-incident actions that he did over and over and over again. So you're going to say, well, this isn't a very sophisticated guy. At the same breath, he's sophisticated, highly sophisticated on some of his way he staged his fires, and then not sophisticated at all on his attempts to get away with it. So this is what you get when you usually mix mental health medications and alcohol. You get this clash of sophistication, okay, if you will. Okay.
Cool.
All right, so then I noticed in his background he had burglary arrests, more than one. And I said, I want to see those reports. And that wasn't part of the prosecution. They go, well, it's not germane. I said, yes, it is. Because a burglary is just an arson without a fire in many cases. And the actions are the same. So let's look at the actions. It's midnight. This is a clip from a big presentation. He brought a hammer to a house that was vacant. He broke in the back of the house and was just getting inside of the house when the police showed up and arrested him. He was described as drunk, and he immediately tells them, I'm not responsible, I have Asperger's. So he's starting to learn how to use his special needs to manipulate the police. What's important to me is he broke into this house at midnight. That's important. He did it at the rear of the house. You're going to see virtually every one of his fire events are at the rear of a property. So he's a thinking person. He brings a flashlight with him and a hammer. So he pre-prepares to do whatever he's about to do, which I think was probably going to be a fire, but he didn't light a fire. And he gets arrested. And then he immediately goes into, I'm not responsible. I was drinking and I took some medications and things like that. So nothing happens to him on that arrest. Shortly thereafter, in 2014, him and his brother move into this apartment complex, and those are like we call townhomes. They're attached to each other, smaller dwellings, but attached to each other. So your neighbor shares a common wall, and they move into this that the brother owns. And and this is important. The father already suspects Justin of being a serial arsonist because everybody tells him that. And so he says, well, I want to move Justin in with his brother so his brother can monitor him. So that's what happens. And he's present. And this is a fairly modern complex with a central area of athletic room and storage rooms. And in one of the storage rooms, a fire is started inside of a wall while Justin was living there. There's no other information to link him to this other than it started a couple of weeks after he moved into this facility. So the next few photos are going to be hard for people to understand. I'll try and explain them real quick here. What this fire looks like. So this is inside of a utility room that's unlocked. So that'd be like a janitor's closet, if you will. Somebody had came in and with a knife cut a hole in the wall. So the wall is made out of what we call here drywall or gypsum board, and started a fire inside the wall, but it's right next to a water heater and right next to the electrical system for the building. So this is a very small fire that didn't extend beyond that little burn that you see on the wall. Okay. What's important is an investigator went to the scene. Let's go to the next slide here. And he recovered the item on the left and a knife. So there's the knife. And the item on the left is the metal tube, gas tube for a barbecue lighter. With the you see an example of on the right, it's the metal piece. That's all that survived. So that is actually a semi-sophisticated fire. Now, a 10-year-old could do this, but they specifically cut a hole in the wall and placed a lighter inside of that and left it there to burn until it ran out of gas. The plastic part of the lighter gets consumed in this fire, and inside the wall, when they cut it away, there's actually quite a bit of damage to the wood inside of the wall. So this fire didn't get any bigger than that on the outside, but it actually destroyed the wall on the inside. And nobody was suspected in this event that Justin lived there. And it doesn't become important until years later. So this was classified as an unsolved arson event.
Yeah.
With no suspects.
It's interesting that investigators would even come out to an incident like that. I wonder if they would down in this part of the world. I'm not sure.
Well, I think they were looking at something else, and I think that the investigators already suspected Justin for some other things.
Okay.
And they saw this small fire in his complex, and they decided to take a look at it. So you're right. In a lot of places in the world, nobody at all would look at that. They judge everything by the size of the fire, and that's not how to look at events. To me, it's how the intent of the fire setter is how we look at events.
Okay.
All right. So let's move to the next case here. We could. So Justin is one of these guys we call in the United States as a couch surfer. Maybe you call it a loafer there. I don't know. Vagabond. I don't really know what it calls it, but he moves around quite a bit because he irritates everybody he lives with because he drinks all day and is kind of loud and sort of stuff. He's not a violent person, but he drinks a lot and is kind of a pest. So within the next year, he moves into his best friend's Ryan's house. This is Ryan's house. And he's staying there for just a short period of time. And at the time, if you're not used to military time, is 37 minutes past midnight. A fire breaks out in the house while Justin is awake. His friend Ryan has a young infant baby and a wife living in the house, and they let Justin sleep on their couch for a while. But earlier in the day, you have to know what was going on in the house, and Justin was helping his friend install cable. There's some cable work being done in the house for the TV in the basement. So this has a basement, and the fire starts right near that installation process, if you will. So a investigator from the local police shows up, and they call it an electrical fire. And then an investigator for the insurance company shows up, and remember this photo. That's why I wrote those words on there. This is close to where the fire started. There is a standing lamp tipped over right there. Mm-hmm. So one of the investigators believes that possibly this lamp caused the fire. Another one believed it was wiring in the walls that caused the fire, or maybe there was marijuana cigarettes there, so maybe it was marijuana cigarette that caused the fire. So in the end, they didn't really know. But what's important is when I pull the old reports, the fire was discovered by Justin. He's the friend. And that's why I yellowed that out there. So he's up at night. He was drinking. Family went to sleep. He awakes and says there's smoke coming out of the walls. And he becomes the hero, evacuates the family from the home, telling them, "You're lucky I was awake. Must be a wiring problem, and you're lucky I saved your life." He's very quick to point out that he saved these people's lives.
Okay.
And his friend is not too bright, and his friend goes, "Wow, thanks." So this is the scene, and I know most people aren't used to seeing fire scenes. The fire actually occurred on the left side of this photo inside the wall. This is a little short half wall of cheap paneling. But there's an electrical outlet that is difficult to see on the sort of the left side of the picture at the lowest part of the burn. And the fire occurred right next to that. And I bet that's as detailed as an investigation anybody did, but I will bet that there's some sort of a lighter wedged in there. because it's inside of the wall. If you recall the previous fire at the condominiums, the fire was inside of a wall. That is not common. That is a very unique MO, if you will.
Okay.
So this fools two certified fire investigators who both call it different things. None of them call it an intentional event. I don't blame them. There's not much to work with here because they don't know the whole history of what's going on. But just remember that lamp photo that I mentioned. You'll see it again at some point.
I'm just going to go to a quick question from Gabe Plays Games. Some of which we mentioned, besides setting fire in the woods and other fires, were there any signs that he was dangerous? And you did mention not necessarily, or showing aggression, but how was his family life growing up? And where is his support structure, his family structure throughout this? Or his support?
So I see Gabe's questions. Could this have been prevented? No, the arson is an unpreventable crime. And I've seen it is a predatory crime, meaning it's done at the whim and the time of choosing of the arsonist. You can have a police officer, a firefighter every 50 yards, and the arsonist will just choose to go somewhere else and light a fire if that's what they want to do. So it's no more preventable. You can prevent accidental fires, but you cannot prevent arson fires. It's a completely unpreventable crime. Justin learned at a very young age, everybody knew that he was prone to setting fires, and they laughed it off as either part of his goofiness or his special needs. And that's the issue. In fact, his relatives, the firefighters, say, man, you've seen more fires than we have, and this is what we do for livings. There's emails and texts from them, and they just wrote it off as fire play. And that's not play. An 8-year-old is fire play. Any older than that, that's now you're dealing with a serial offender. And I know people don't like those labels, but that's the reality. So this is a staged event with fire set right near this electrical outlet. There's a little bit better photo of that. So this is what was blamed. And so that tells me later on that Justin absolutely knew he was going to fool some investigator. So Gérard can maybe discuss what staging is, but basically staging is quite rare in the arson world. It's doing something at a crime scene that you want to fool the investigators to think something else happened. And you don't see it too often in the arson world. It's more, you see it in other things. Fraud, maybe in fraud scenes, but he's doing crime scene staging here, which is really, really sophisticated. So that's what you see with this photo.
Okay.
I just wonder, you often see with your autism spectrum stuff, I mean, you can get guys that are phenomenally intelligent, that will get 90% on all their tests and exams, but they have autism, and their autism really manifests in the sense that they don't know how to relate to people socially. They don't really know how to judge the impact of their actions. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense in that way, that you can have a guy who's quite smart in how he goes about planning or covering up his fire, but then he's also sending text messages and Facebook posts, and that's because that's the social part. That's sort of his inability to understand that what I'm saying is not appropriate to other people, because he doesn't really understand the relationship side of it. So, I mean, it kind of does make sense from a sort of autism spectrum that you can get this weird mix of kind of smart and intelligent how he goes about it, but also in some other ways, he's a dumbass. He's doing stuff that no other criminal will be posting, that I just set something on fire and boasting about it.
That's precisely, Gérard, what happens in this case. That's precisely what happened. His crime scenes are kind of sophisticated, but his after-action events are blatantly silly. And he feels bad when some of his friends are hurt. He literally feels bad and tries to make them whole again, and then does the same thing again 3 days later. So there's this dichotomy that you just go, and I'm certainly not an expert on Asperger's, but I see it so much amongst serial arsonists, autism and Asperger's. So anyway, you're going to see that just what you said manifests itself in this case.
Okay.
So after this event, people start to get real suspicious with him, and he moves with some friends to the other side of the United States, in a town called Apache Junction, Arizona. It's right near Phoenix, Arizona. And within days of moving in, he's staying with some friends, so he's couch surfing. He drunkenly calls our 911 emergency system and reports a fire in the apartment. And they show up, the police and fire department, and he's drunk and he denies making the phone call. It's clearly him. I've heard the 911 tape. He has a very distinct Boston accent in Arizona that would really stand out. And he's clearly drunk, and there's no fire. So this sort of activity is related to serial fire setting as well, reporting events falsely. And this isn't the first or last time he'll do that. So now let's look at this. And I use this slide to teach our other arson investigators something. So while he's staying with these same people, a few weeks after this fake 911 call, his roommate gets a brand new sports car, really nice car. And Justin is immediately jealous because this is Justin's car, this Volkswagen, sort of a passenger car. And Justin's like, wow, I would really like a new car like yours, but mine's pretty new and I owe a lot of money on it. He goes, maybe it'll get hit by lightning. He makes this joke, maybe it'll get hit by lightning, so I can get a new one through insurance. Within 1 week of that Justin's car is on park there. Here's the issue. It is not broken into. It is closed and locked at the time of this event. The fire investigator, the fire department did not arrive because the fire put itself out eventually. So nobody noticed it. Justin discovered his own car fire. And the fire investigator standing there is from a private insurance company. He happens to be an electrical engineer, so he goes through this car from bumper to bumper and clearly says this is not an electrical failure in the car. So that's the good news. He's correct. And then this investigator, you'll see in the next photos, and I apologize, they're not very good, but that's the best we can work with. You're going to see evidence from this scene. And I've circled in red here some evidence. That is a water bottle that's been melted. And this is where the fire started. So it started on the front passenger side floor, right next to the transmission of the vehicle. So it would be basically at the feet of the passenger if they're a front passenger. And there's only thing in that circle where the fire started. The engineer cleared all the wires, said they did not cause this fire. So the only thing there was water, and may or may have had water in it, a plastic water bottle, and the top to a lighter. Unfortunately, this engineer investigator decided that this fire, he ignored the top of the lighter, even though he mentioned it in his report, said it was due to refraction of the sun's rays through the water in the bottle, causing an ignition. That can happen, and it does happen. You can make it happen, but not in this scenario. And so that was a ridiculous call by this investigator. And so later on, when we try to prosecute this fire, this investigator would not change his mind. So that was a problem for us. But he ignored the fact that there was a lighter in the area of origin. So if we go to the next photo, again, these are not the best photos. This is the zoom in is the best I have. The top, the metal top of a plastic butane cigarette lighter. That's all that exists. And remember, we have a cigarette lighter or a barbecue lighter in one of Justin's previous fires. So, this is information we're just going to think about for a while. So there is an ignition source where this fire started, and I know that the engineer believed the water bottle was it, but when we really view the water bottle, it actually had no water in it. So you can't get one of those types of fires without some water in the bottle. Anyways, later on, I determined that this is what caused the fire, and Justin likely placed this in the car lit and jammed something in the trigger to keep it lit, which is what he appeared to do at the other scenes. He was not charged eventually with this fire. It was just too many problems with the investigation. So very unique thing. That is a staged fire scene. So here's an example I made for court. This is a lighter, typical cigarette lighter. in the United States, and you can just jam a piece of plastic, in this case, wood from a toothpick, and it'll stay lit until it runs out of fuel. And that's a nice flame source that will ignite most materials. And when the beauty of it is that once the fire starts, it'll burn away the plastic. And unless the investigators are looking hard, the only thing that survives is that metal top. So I'm not trying to teach any of you people out there how to be better arsonists, but this is not new information. But this was seen at that scene, and I believe that's what was used, some configuration like this. I see a lot of comments online, so I hope people don't try this for insurance fraud. Okay, so we'll skip through that. The investigator determined it was an accidental fire. That doesn't slow me down. In cases like this, where I look at old cases, quite often I reverse the original findings on fires if there's enough data to do that. And I believe there was in this case. So as we go forward, you're going to see that those two people immediately that Justin was staying with in that town of Apache Junction, they kick him out. They immediately go, you were just talking about you need a new car and you hope it catches on fire by lightning. So we think you had something to do with this. Plus, you're drunk all the time. So they kicked him out. So now he has to find a new place to live. And people from outside of the U.S. do not realize that Arizona is a all desert, mostly desert and dry environment, and our elderly tend to move there. People from the northern part of the country move there to retire. It doesn't cost much to live there, and the weather's the same all year long. It's hot and dry. And so there's a lot of retirement communities. So you're going to see now that Justin moves in with a retired person into this community, and you're going to see that within weeks of him moving in, there's 6 fire incidents in this picture. And these are these modular homes, very neighborhood. It's elderly people mostly, and it's a crime-free neighborhood. There are no crimes in this neighborhood. Within weeks of Justin moving in there, 6 fire incidents occur, and he's involved in every one of them as the rescuer or the person who originally found the fire. So that becomes obviously high interest to the local fire officials. And most of these people live here are over 80 years old, so he stands out. So this is what we're going to be looking at for the next several events.
Okay, should we just look at a couple of the questions in the chat here? We've got his job. Did he have a job that he could afford? What did he do?
So he held his parents and his friends kept. He's a really nice guy, and his parents and his friends got him sort of easy jobs. He liked it. He worked at a convenience store gas station. So something like a 7-Eleven, but he worked at one of those while he was in Arizona. Because of his special needs and his medical history, he didn't need to make much money because the government of the U.S. Gives him disability monies because of his mental health and some physical health disabilities. So he doesn't need to make a lot of money to survive in the world. He gets a check from the government virtually every 2 weeks, and that pays for a reasonable place to live and some groceries and things like that. And so he can't hold a job too much because he's frequently drunk, and that's one of his issues. And so he does have a job. He's a very functioning person. He drives a vehicle as well, as you saw.
Yeah. Gabe says it's almost as if he wanted to be caught, possibly enjoyed the fact that he was the center of attention. Marlene asks, was it possible he made the call to figure out response times of emergency services? Do you think these are the kind, are these kinds of the tactics he's deploying?
In most cases, I would say that's ridiculous because most arsonists do not have that mental capacity to do, most serial arsonists do not have the mental capacity to think about the fire department or the police department. They don't even think about being caught. In his case, it's a possibility. So good call there, because he actually understands police and fire very well. He may have been doing these 911 calls to time them. He really understands how investigators work, and he demonstrates that in his interviews. He knows what they're going to look at, and you'll see later on he starts to steer them towards likely other suspects. He starts to manipulate the police, and he's not like I say, he's not the brightest guy, but he's clever. I would call him very clever. So it's possible he very much understands police and fire tactics.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to jump into the next set of cases, as you mentioned. But first, this.
In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, knowing the minds of killers isn't curiosity, it's survival. Subscribe to Profiler Africa now. It's free. Or become a member and help keep the channel alive. Remember, trust nobody.
Okay, so there's a good bit of advice for you guys. All right, so let's jump back into the presentation, and then let's look at these next series of incidents, Ed.
Okay, before we start that, I'm going to move really quickly through those incidents.
Yeah,
because they're all going to start to look and sound exactly the same, and it gets confusing. If we go to the next slide or so, we're going to see his lifestyle. This is what he does, and he posts every night. He sits in his backyard patio and has a little not a bonfire, but a fire pit, we would call that here. It's like a barbecue pit, and that's the type that's legal in Arizona. And he sits there and he drinks all night long till wee hours in the morning, and then he takes pictures of it and posts pictures of himself on social media. He also, during the day when he's not working, he goes to his neighbors and offers to help them with little jobs. They love him. His neighbors love him. He's a helpful young guy. It's an elderly community, so not too many young, healthy people. And so he helps them move stuff and clean stuff and do stuff. And you're going to find out that all of his victims, he's visited their home prior to the fire event. And they like him. He's a very sociable, nice guy. So that's what you get. So we'll move real quick through these.
I just want to ask quickly. I mean, he's sitting, he's spending his time hanging out with fires, if you like. Is the allure here to do some, is it the allure to see the fire? Does he have is he drawn to the fire itself? Or is it the act of doing something to something? If you get the question, I know that's a bit abstract.
In his case, everybody likes fire. I mean, I like a fire pit too, but in his case, he's drawn to the excitement of the event and being part of the solution to the problem. He wants to be the hero. He wants to help the cops.
Okay.
And so that's what you get. So real quickly, there's a fire. This 92-year-old female. Justin was in her house earlier that day and prior days helping her do some cleaning or something. A fire occurs just before 11 o'clock at night. She's 92 years old. She cannot hear. And Justin knows this. Justin lives across the street. He's awake at time of night, drinking, of course, and smoking. And he sees smoke coming from her house, and he reports it to his roommate. And he says, call 911. There's a fire. I'm going to go rescue her. He breaks into her home and basically carries her, pushes her out of the home.
Okay.
And after this event, he's viewed as a hero. So he said, he tells investigators, I knew she was home and can't hear because she doesn't have sleeping aids or hearing aids. And so I knew I had to break in and save her. So he's very familiar with this lady beforehand. And he says that she has a messy back room, and that's probably where the fire started. And this fire did start near a lamp and near a water heater, which is a consistent thing. All right, so let's go forward. Now, he posts about this immediately even as the firefighters, I saved another life is what he says on some of his posts. And so he's telling the people back in Massachusetts on the other side of the country what he's up to. And he goes to the emergency room and even posts this photo on Facebook from the emergency room. He had the nurse take his picture and shows how he broke into the house and he posting it back to his friends. What he did. And, that could happen to a regular person who didn't set the fire. So that's what he does following this event.
It's interesting that it seems like a family member saying, "You've seen more fire than I have, and it's my job." LOL.
So that's the famous thing brought up in trial. That is his firefighter cousin.
Mm.
And at some point they stop LOLing because they call it, this is not funny anymore, Justin. So he keeps posting and he says, "I'm not here to gloat, but I'm so glad I was able to save another life." And there it is. That's it, him in a nutshell right there. So he claims he saved the lives of his friend back in Massachusetts. Remember, he set a fire in their basement. And now this is another life that he's saying. He's racking up his save totals. And then we'll skip through some of the text, but he keeps talking about this and he's getting feedback from all his friends. Wow, great job. And fist bumps and all this stuff. So he's saved all this stuff for years, printed it out and stuff.
I mean, all of that.
Posted on
Gérard, Gérard, any comments on what that can do to somebody, that all of that kind of positive reinforcement?
Sorry, I was muted. That's exactly what it is. It reinforces him to want to do it again if he's getting this positive feedback. And you sometimes see this in people with autism spectrum disorders, not in this extent, but let's say, for example, they don't really like contact with people. They don't have great social skills. So you might one day say something like, I'm going to blow up the school, or I'm going to come and shoot you. That causes people to leave him alone. He's happy with the result. He just doesn't realize that the way he's getting that result is unhealthy. So sometimes it's almost a case of trying to find, how can we get the same result that you don't have people bugging you, but you don't have to threaten to kill people. So often, it's trying to find a way of getting something, but they're doing it in a very, very unhealthy way that's not actually a very positive way. So for sure, I mean, he could be getting this positive self-regard. I mean, who doesn't like being complimented and told that they're great and they're a hero? That'll cause him to do it again, for sure. And I think with anybody, and maybe more so with the guy who lacks good social skills, about how do I, under a normal, healthy way, get positive regard from people?
Just want to say thank you quickly to Shelley Foot for your contribution. We appreciate, guys, if you would like to contribute to keeping the channel independent and allowing us to bring you more and more content as we grow, then you are welcome to join Shelley and contribute as well. But thank you, Shelley. Just a quick question before we move on. Why didn't he become a firefighter if he wanted to save people from fires? Did we cover why he didn't go into the profession?
Oh yeah, his medical issue and his mental health issues prohibited him from that. He certainly wasn't very fit. Chris had another that questioner just had another great point. He goes, "Do arsonists work up to big fires?" And that's been a myth in the serial arson industry for years. And the answer is no. Serial arsonists just set fires. They don't have ability to set a little one or a big one. They have the ability to set a fire. We ignore them on the small ones until they actually set a big one that now everybody gets upset about. So that is the curse of the fire profession, is we ignore small fires. I lecture that all the time. Every serial arsonist, everybody believes, well, they lead up to big fires. I said, no, if you start enough fires, one's going to get big, and sooner or later you'll kill somebody. So those are great questions, Chris. This is what. So, go ahead.
Yeah. No. How much of this information is available to you when you kind of come into how much are you gathering as you go, or is a lot of this compiled already and presented to you when you come on board, kind of thing?
So I came on after he was arrested. So I have the luxury, and believe me, it's a luxury to look backwards at 10 other investigators' work. They don't know what I know at the time. I don't blame them for some of their being fooled on some of these cases, because they only know of one fire by one special needs person. And so they go, well, that's probably an accident. And I have the ability to look back at 20 events and go, okay, one might be an accident, 5 isn't, and 20 sure isn't. And this is a person who actually got more sophisticated as he went. And you'll see why by the next slide. He gets an award from the city of this. Go to the next one. And that's them telling him he's getting an award, and he got this award. Wow. Before they could deliver that to them, he set 2 more fires.
Sure. Wow.
Yes, that's
so
some
he
positive.
he had this prominently displayed at his house. He posted it on the internet, and he was very proud of this life-saving award for this 92-year-old lady's fire. Before he got that award, this is what he says. He goes back to help this 92-year-old lady and her daughter. He goes and he's going to help them clean out the burnt property. It's pretty seriously damaged. And she says, and she tells him with her daughter present, I don't think I have enough. My insurance will cover this because it's not enough damage. And he said, well, I'll just burn it down for you. That's the first time anybody suspected him of being an arsonist. Okay. And the women laughed at him being funny, and he turns to him very serious. He says, I won't help you. I will burn this down for you. And they get a little creeped out at that point. And so sure as heck, the house is vacant. And a couple of weeks later, a couple of days after he says this, there's a fire in that property again, second fire. And the elderly lady was displaced because of the first fire, so nobody was injured. And the fire's in the exact same spot as the first fire. Okay. And Justin tried to direct the police that it was some kids in the area with fireworks and things like that. And of course, he's the person who noticed this second fire, and he had somebody else call the police and fire departments. So he doesn't want to be on the 911 call anymore. So he helps somebody else. So that's the next one. Go ahead. Again, these fire scenes will look the same after a while, but it's at the rear of the structure in the same spot. And this is a news footage of the event, and Justin is in that square watching them and talking to the investigators. So Gérard and I are interested in this. This is post-incident behavior that we really like to document. And he's telling the investigators, I think maybe some kids are involved that have fireworks or something like that. So he's trying to misdirect the investigation right there. And like I said, he shows up on photos at the scene talking to investigators.
Is it a typical part of an investigation to make a note of who is at the scene when investigating?
It is if they're acting suspicious or funny, but this guy's the neighborhood hero, so they don't really consider him too suspicious. Okay. Yeah. And now Justin's own home, this is where he lived with his roommate, reports smoke in the home, and investigators show up and they find a fire. And then they said, well, there's a second fire in another room that appears to be a week old. And so there was 2 fires within the home where Justin was staying. One was never reported. One of them was reported. And Justin was the last person in the room where the fire started. And it was near an appliance, a furnace. And Justin's telling the firefighters, this furnace was acting up. And so I told my roommate, don't turn it on. And he turned it on. So Justin, again, is providing an alibi for this event, and they classify it as an accidental fire. And so puts him present. Justin had already staged fire extinguishers near this before the fire. So despite all these red flags, it was called an electrical event. So that's pretty common. So let's go on. And by the way, he has not gotten his award yet, so he's waiting to get his award. Now, another elderly neighbor, another elderly woman who lives alone, Justin was helping her clean her property that day, and that night at midnight, there's a fire on her back door. This is clearly an arson fire. Justin was seen at the time outside of his home. He did not report this one. He told somebody else to report it, but he was seen outside smoking before this fire. So that's a very common thing. This lady did not report this incident. So the next day, Justin walked over and said, I heard you got a fire last night. You need to report this. He's convinced her to report it. And if you go to the next slide, when the investigators show up after this lady, Justin talked to her in reporting, he goes out to meet them and tells them there's some teenagers in the area causing fires. And really, there are no teenagers that live in this neighborhood. So he's saying that some teenagers come in on bicycles and start these fires. So now he's staging the event post-event. It's a very little clever move. Yeah. Now the big event, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. I mean, it seems like, he moves to an area and quite quickly gets to know people in that community. Is that a part of him kind of scouting out for potential victims? And is he starting, is there a particular victim profile you're starting to see here as well? I mean, I see there've been a number of them that kind of seem to be elderly ladies, quite, elderly, quite vulnerable, maybe, quite isolated perhaps.
Well, of all of his victims, all but two, there's say 25 victims, all but two are either extremely elderly or there's babies present in other ones. So these are the most vulnerable people in our society, is babies under the care of others, and or the extreme elderly, and they just can't move fast enough. They can't be evacuated. There could have been multiple fatal fires here. And you're going to see the next event is the fatal fire. We're not going to show the fatality, but
no.
So this is across the street from Justin's home, and this is what he gets arrested for eventually and prosecuted for eventually. So Justin, and that red star shows where the victim fell. The victim was outside of his home. He's a 90-year-old man who ran in to get the car keys for his car while the fire's burning so he could move his car. And I don't think Justin planned on that happening. And that person died in this fire. And we're not going to look at those photos, but if you back up to the previous photo, the previous slide, you'll see. So this is across the street from Justin's house. And at the time of this fire, Justin and the elderly man who lives here and another person were sitting outside at the next door neighbors drinking a beer. All three together. Justin excuses himself and says he has to go inside and cook some frozen meat. And in the 10 minutes that he's inside of his own home, out of the view of his drinking partners, this fire erupts. Justin comes out and says, "Hey, your house is on fire." So again, he's the first reporting person. He later denied that to the police, but it ends up being true. So he reports this. The neighbor's elderly, he can barely move. And so Justin goes, "I'll go check to see if anybody's in there." And he knows darn well that the neighbor lives alone. So there's nobody in there. And Justin is seen running into this burning house. And this is a big fire. This becomes a pretty big fire. Justin runs into the other side of the house and comes out and says, "There's nobody in here. I checked, there's nobody to rescue." And everybody in the neighborhood knew that there was nobody in the house. Okay. And about that time is when the elderly man ran inside of this doorway that you're seeing here and then literally burst into flames in front of 5 or 6 witnesses. He was looking for his car keys to move his car, and then the fire he just burst into flames. And that's about the time the police pulled up and saw this man standing there fully on fire, and Justin standing outside looking shocked, because I don't think that was the plan that Justin had for this event. So now you have a fatality, and now the police, everybody in the neighborhood says, "Justin's at every one of these fires. You people need to look at him." And that's when they really start. Go to your next photos and you'll see the evidence at this scene eventually. Okay, right in the area of origin, they find this. Now, the elderly man lived alone, but his friends that knew him said he doesn't smoke or anything in the house. There's no reason to have this in his house. That is normally outside by his barbecue on his back patio. So this is in a place, this is what started the fire. And have we seen that before? Yes, we've seen that in Massachusetts, across the country, had a fire where Justin was living. So this is a barbecue lighter, and this is likely what caused this fire because it's in the area of origin. It survived better. I don't know why it survived, but it did. And so now you have the first real piece of incendiary evidence that people are starting to realize. I mean, and we'll move through this real quick here if we go to the next.
Okay. It does seem quite odd that he's, it would have come up surely that as part of the investigation that investigator had noticed these types of lighters, for example, in the environment, and yet he's continuing to kind of go to that pretty much the same type of lighter.
Well, I don't think that he realized that the investigators had found lighters in the past. They don't probably even share that information with me. Okay. So he probably assumes it's all been burned up.
Okay.
Okay, so after this fatal fire in Arizona, he comes under scrutiny and the police really focusing on him, take him in for detailed interviews. His interviews are really recorded for over hours, and his story is just falling apart. At the same time, the police in Arizona are getting information from people in Massachusetts who have heard about this and said, you need to look at Justin because he's around fires everywhere he goes. So now they have an idea, finally, that something is going on with this kid. And what he does is he moves to Massachusetts. If you go back to that Massachusetts photo right there, just for a couple of days. Go back one more slide, please. Yeah. That's the same condominium complex he was living in with his brother. And in the 2 days he's there, a car catches on fire right in front of his house, and it's an arson. The day after that fire, Justin moves back to Arizona to another friend who says, I'll take you in. You're a nice guy. So a fire happened right here. And that's back in Massachusetts. He immediately leaves Massachusetts and a couple days later moves back to a different part of, moves to Texas. He moves to the state of Texas. A friend he met online takes him in and into her house with his elderly mother and says, I feel bad for you, Justin. And she doesn't even know, but they know each other online, and says, I'm going to take you in. And within 5 days of him moving in, their house nearly burns down and her mother's nearly killed. So he's already had a fatal fire, and he knows the police are looking at him. He tells his people, everybody thinks I did this, and I didn't. I just have bad luck. Fires follow me wherever I go. He tells that to everybody online and to the police. And I know we're short on time, but we'll look at this last fire because there's a couple of still images for what he's doing at the time.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
So he's in the house. Keep going. We'll get to. He calls 911 and tells them, I think the cat locked door. He's outside of the house smoking at the time of this fire. He discovers it. He calls the emergency 911, and he's on their recorded line. I think a lamp fell over. The cat knocked the lamp over. Have we seen these lamps knocked over before?
Ed, you asked us to remember a picture earlier. Yes. You asked us to remember a picture. We remembered it. And this is definitely, yes.
Yes. I don't care how big your cat is, unless it's a lion, is not going to knock over this lamp.
Yeah.
And they eventually find video from outside of the house that shows Justin, a shadow of Justin walking around in this room just minutes before the fire. And there's video outside. You can tell by that little block. So he's standing outside waiting for this fire to happen while his friend and her elderly mother are asleep inside the house. And I know we don't have time to go through all that, but this is a still image that when he's waiting, he's smoking cigarettes, he's drunk, and somebody asked about medications. He took pain pills. And he says, I might have taken some pain pills that night. I don't remember stuff. That's sort of one of his favorite go-tos. Okay. Go ahead. Next photo. And, prior to this event, this is pre-event behavior. The hours prior to this, he just moved into this house, remember? He tells them, do you have fire extinguishers? I need to test them for fire safety. And he takes one off their wall, and he has it, and he's examining it. And that's pre-event staging. And so, because he's going to hear on this event, and he did try to put out the fire.
Okay.
So this is hours before the fire. He's examining their fire extinguisher.
Okay. Just a quick question. Would fingerprints survive a fire?
Go ahead.
Because, we just had a question from Shelley. Would fingerprints?
Yes, they do. They're hard to find.
Okay.
Say that again.
No. I was just asking the question. So.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, fingerprints survive fire. DNA survives fires. They're just hard to find and hard to collect.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah. Now we go back to the Arson investigation report. Yeah.
So Justin gets grilled by an arson investigator. It's a compelling video. The guy interviews him for 2 hours, and Justin admits he lied about this whole thing, that he probably accidentally knocked down the lamp. And then this investigator is on video saying, well, Justin, you're involved in a murder over in another state, and you're involved in all these fires in Massachusetts. So finally they started putting all this together. And Justin goes, yeah. And I know I lied about this fire, but I'm a good guy. And the fire investigator says, well, if you just apologize to the homeowner, we'll let this go. And that's what happened. And the investigator didn't do anything with him on that fire in Texas. It was quite embarrassing. Yeah. This is about the time that the Arizona prosecutors reached out to me and said, look, we have all these events and we want to try and prosecute them. And I'll wrap this up in about 3 minutes here. There's no more photos to really show. There's a lot of interviews. I listened to all of his interviews. The Massachusetts State Police took over all the cases in Massachusetts. The prosecutors in Phoenix, Arizona, took over all the cases in Arizona, and they brought all this together. And we were able to. The courts allowed us to bring in all of his past behavior. This is Justin on the video, actually rescuing the elderly woman in that last fire. Okay. Justin was arrested, held in jail in Arizona for some time, pending my investigation, pending psychological assessments, pending sanity type stuff. And he was deemed fit to go to court. They filed not murder charges, but I believe manslaughter charges against him and multiple arson charges. I came in and took me a couple of months to do an assessment of all these events and say, this is pre-planning, pre-staging, actually very sophisticated behavior to start the fires and to attempt to cover them up, followed by silly behavior and not sophisticated behavior by bragging online over and over and over again. And they were able to, the courts allowed them to bring in all my profiling, investigative psychology stuff, all the evidence from the previous events. And I walked him through all this. This is the steps he took, consistent behavior across a 20 events, even the burglaries, the behavior was consistent, what he did. And the courts allowed all this stuff. And as soon as it was allowed, Justin's attorneys pled him guilty. And go to the last slide, Paul, because his attorneys, go ahead.
So just for the prosecution,
this is him getting released.
Okay. Yeah. So each state prosecuted their own cases. It was not like you could do like a federal one trial with all the cases from the different states together in one trial, or did you have to have it split up per state?
That's a great point, and that is a legal issue. It is. It would have to be state by state. There are no federal arson crimes in the United States, other than church arsons and a couple of, if they occurred in a national forest or something like that. But really, most of your arson charges in the United States are local issues. That's why our FBI does not have arson investigators. It's not really a federal crime most of the time. So it's mostly a state crime, except if it's wildland arsons, which will occur on federal property. If that
so could you own?
And so you're right. For a prosecutor, but
so if he's prosecuted in 3 different states, he lost it. So if he's prosecuted theoretically in say 3 different states for a bunch of crimes in each particular state, let's say he's convicted theoretically in Massachusetts first. He now maybe goes to Arizona for those cases. You couldn't bring those other cases in during the trial, but you could only mention them at the sentencing, or would you be able to, during the trial, mention his previous convictions?
So, great point. It's a legal issue. That is why my part of the case was very legally controlled, because I'm bringing in past actions. Actually, most of his past actions were called accidents. So that's even more problematic. But the first slides that we didn't show have to do with the laws in the U.S. You can bring in past bad behavior as part of a prosecution if it's similar or consistent behavior. And so that's what they needed me for. We can't bring in past convictions in front of a jury, but none of these cases he was ever convicted before. So
Okay, yeah.
So they decided to try in Arizona for the murder or for the fatality. And then I was able to bring his past fires as consistent behavior leading up to the fatality fire. And that would have been allowed. And his lawyers knew that. And that's why they pled him guilty. He got, I believe, 18 years in prison. Who knows how much time he'll do, but he was facing life in prison. And so his lawyers realized that there's no way to defend this case after that, once they allowed these previous actions. So my part of this case was after his arrest, but it was actually the only way you could bring in stuff from other jurisdictions. That makes sense?
And so he never prosecuted, once he got the conviction on the murder, did they just drop any potential prosecutions from other states and other cases?
Yes, because the previous fires were not fatal fires. He's going to do more than enough time in Arizona to cover all those other events.
Okay.
Had there been fatal fires in other states, they probably would have tried him in other states. And he would have got released from prison in Arizona and gone into prison in Massachusetts. But he didn't have that issue. So
and Shelley asked a question.
I went through a really complex case.
Did the Asperger's did the Asperger's become part of the sentencing issues? Do you think that contributed to him getting the 18 years?
Yes, absolutely. His special needs the courts in the United States are very in tune to mental health issues. Absolutely. And that becomes part of it. But we showed his sophistication. They weren't going to let him off free. Like you said, you are held responsible for your actions. And we showed the sophistication of his events to say, this is not some insane person. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to cover it up, knows how to lie about it, and how to misdirect authorities towards other people, which he did at every scene. So that's sophistication.
Yeah, I definitely don't.
But certainly he didn't get as much time as he could have because of
Yeah, no, for sure.
There's a lot of good questions, but we don't have time to answer them.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to go back to are there any other slides we need to look at here? Ed, behavior analysis, I don't know if there's any, if we want to wrap up
just at the very
presentation component. Shall I go right to the end? Analysis.
If you go back to the case links one is important.
Yes, here we go.
So Gérard and I practice something called investigative psychology, and one of the parts of it is case linkage, linking events. And you can use psychological behavior, you can use evidence, you can use witnesses, you can use all this stuff. And this is how the main links to him, the common denominator is him being present. He lived at every one of these events in 3 different U.S. states. He was the one that found or reported most, if not all, of these events. And many of the events, he staged these to be electrical events, very sophisticated. All were at night, all were at the rear of a property. And then his pre-fire behavior was consistent at every one of these. He was drinking to the point of being drunk, smoking, and outside and available at the time of these events. So these are the case linkages parts that we say this is how we can link them to all these events in various areas of the country. Okay. And then his post-fire behavior is consistent. He literally bragged about this stuff over and over and over relentlessly on social media. And all that came back to haunt him. So that's the case linkage part that part of investigative psychology that we practice, using the actual evidence to support the information against your offender.
What is the scenario in which you would want to speak to somebody like Justin? I mean, I gather you've got a lot of information. You've got the investigators who are directly interviewing him, who have conducted past interviews, who might have access to video of that, for example. When would you actually feel that you would need to sit down and actually get a personal sense of the suspect?
Well, I was an arson investigator, and I found that the single best time to get your most accurate interview is immediately after catching the person.
Okay.
They're usually exhausted, they're worn out from the chase or thinking about being arrested. They haven't got a lawyer yet. They haven't got a psychologist to tell them it's not their fault yet, or to create all these excuses for them. And they haven't been in the jail or prison system, which completely changes people on how you deal with them. So a lot of research is from prisoners, unfortunately, and it's not in their best interest to be honest when speaking to investigators or psychologists while they're behind prison bars. So you don't get many honest answers there. So I find the best time is when I catch them and they're worn out. And it obviously in this case is complex because I would really want to know his history before I catch him. And to know all this stuff about his past, maybe he's going to be honest about me when he realizes I know so much about him. So that's the best time. Later on, if he gets out of prison and starts doing a YouTube show, it'll be very self-serving. He'll speak like a psychologist because he's got all these words implanted in his head now. And so when you see people or they give interviews from prison, I don't find much of that reliable. And Gérard has more experience of that than me. But
would he, as part of his
very self-serving statements,
as part of his incarceration, would he undergo, specific, focused kind of treatment for his issues?
I hope so. Everybody meets him. He's a likable guy. He's actually he wanted friends. He wanted people to sit and drink with him, and nobody would sit up all night and drink with them. And then, when everybody's gone, he starts his little devilish behavior. He clearly wanted friends. He wanted to be loved. He's a nice guy that unfortunately killed somebody. And he needed to be stopped, and he needed to be incarcerated because he wasn't going to stop. But I would talk to this guy a time, and if he gets treatment, I don't know much successful fire setting treatment. I know there's a lot of psychologists would disagree with me, but I've seen so much recidivism. I just don't know any treatment that actually works. And remember, he's going to be, if he gets out of prison, he'll be at risk for this the rest of his life.
Well, that's what I would.
People near him will be at risk. And that's just,
yeah. I mean, I'm not aware of any, arson therapy, because it's probably generally so rare compared to all the other crimes. And it's not as if arsonists are all one and the same, as Ed clearly points out in his books. So I don't think any psychologist in prisons is really going to know what to do to cure him of his arson behavior. I don't think anybody will know. So that's the one aspect. And I think he'd probably love, because he'll have a captivated audience who has to sit and listen to him. So he might like therapy.
Yeah.
But will it change him? I seriously don't think so. I agree 100% by what I've heard here. He was trialable. He was able to be put on trial. I don't think his mental illness issues would have been an excuse to rob him of responsibility. So I'm quite comfortable from what I've heard that decision was the right decision also. Yeah, for sure.
And on top of that, I want to point out that it was the prosecutors in this case who are the hero, because most of the police and fire people were either fooled or weren't sure what to do. But the lead prosecutor on this case, a man named Luke Coyne, his picture's on our last slide, I think, he received Investigator of the Year. He's not an investigator, but he ran this task force. He is actually a highly skilled arson prosecutor, which there's very few in the world. And he knew enough to reach out to a lot of corners for help. And maybe the very last slide on this thing will show him getting an award. But there you go. I'm probably wrong by a slider there. The gentleman on the left was the person who pushed this. His partner is on the right, and then a Massachusetts state troopers in the center there. And those are the guys who really saw him for what he was. They brought me into the case later on, and they received this international award, and they should have. And it's a very difficult case, very technical, problematic case, and the prosecutors are the ones that realized that they could go forward.
Yeah, they have a ballsy prosecutor.
I'm glad you showed that picture.
Yeah. Are you able to put?
Yeah, and he does, and he's done other cases that are just as good.
When somebody like this is ultimately released, would there be conditions upon his release? Would there be kind of monitoring because of the nature of the crimes and the fact that we know that there's kind of a recidivism problem with these types of offenders? Could they do that? I mean, because they can't stop him starting a fire, once he's released, surely, if he's cooking himself supper or something, or can they? I don't know.
No, they can't. And, his biggest issue is alcohol, probably, other than some mental health issues, but alcohol is his biggest issue. Maybe if they treat that, and that's a pretty high recidivism rate there as well. But his conditions of his parole when it comes up will be, you can't possess a lighter. That's just sort of silly on its face, or you can't possess fire setting materials. They're everywhere in the world, and anybody can set a fire at any time. So yeah, that's nice to say, but really his biggest problem is going to be alcohol, and he's like that.
Okay.
So
would you be concerned about when it comes to him being released? What level of concern are you at for him really going ahead and reoffending upon release?
Oh, I think it's a major concern for him. And his fires were dangerous from the beginning because they were set inside of occupied structures. And that most serial arsonists do not do that. They set fires to things outside, most serial arsonists. So his off the charts, he was one of the highest dangerous serial arsonists that I've ever encountered, even though he seems like a nice guy. And people can't wrap their mind around that. He doesn't look evil. He doesn't act evil, but he's evil or just dangerous. Yeah. And so they said, I absolutely, I'm sorry.
That's what they said about Ted Bundy too. He's a nice guy.
Exactly.
That's what it is. Yeah. The people that met Ted Bundy thought he was one of the nicest guys they've ever met. And he's one of the most famous serial killers ever.
Yeah. Well, guys, I mean, it's been a fascinating deep dive into, we've never gone into such detail on an arson case. And I mean, I just have another 20 questions in my mind that I could ask you already, just fascinating. And thank you so much, Ed. Gérard, what are your kind of final thoughts here, or comments or questions?
Yeah, I mean, it was so interesting. I mean, there's so many features of stuff we see with other serial and even mass violence guys. You had the geographical locations that he's doing. He's all around the places where he is. He's not traveling an hour away to set a fire. It's all that common geographical profiling stuff that they comment on in terms of some of the serial patterns of behavior. There was the leakage. He's telling people, hey, this is what I did. This is great, etc. on the social media. That kind of identification. I want to be a fireman, but I can't, but I still can't be. And how can I get myself in some way in that world, which is by setting fires and then being the hero. There was a fourth aspect, which I can't recall. So just, a lot of interesting stuff. But I mean, for me, technically the fascinating stuff would have been the fact that you were able to use that linkage information in a trial. And I know in South Africa, that is, in the US, it's really difficult to bring that information in. So I think all credit to you. But like you said, if you didn't have a prosecutor who's got the balls to say, we're going to do this, we're going to call in the experts and understanding fire stuff, it would have been absolutely dead in the water. So like I say, definitely kudos to those involved. And for you with your background and experience, I think you're one of the few people who could have actually been the expert to introduce that kind of linkage evidence. So that was really amazing. So yeah, just fascinating case all around.
Yeah.
Yeah, good case.
Ed, what are your kind of big takeaways from this case? You mentioned one or two of them, but just to kind of conclude.
Okay, well, one of my big takeaways is there's other people like him. We in the arson business, if the arsonist moves or changes their name, if it's a female and she gets married, it's very difficult to track them. And if they're setting fires in different jurisdictions, we don't have a national police force. And so it's very difficult to track them. So there's many more offenders like him, only most of them are females. And that's a whole different story. And they get away with it way more than males. Most of them are females and they target themselves and their own children. And I've written about that. Gérard's seen that. Those are the more dangerous serial arsonists I've encountered, where they're killing their kids over and over again. And they get away with it. It's called accidents. And so that's a whole different story. And we'll be here for 3 days talking about that.
Well, I mean, I think you've set us up for a future episode down the line, because we do spend an inordinate amount of time, unfortunately, talking about male offenders. It'll be very interesting to understand how the fairer half of the species fares in your universe. That sounds fascinating. All right,
and of course you've got. Sorry, and just to touch off, you've written a number of books. The people who didn't see the first episode with you, I mean, Ed's got a bunch of books that are some of them more textbook leaning, and some of them that are more just case study leaning. So definitely look up on Ed's website if you're interested in reading more about some of these fascinating case studies. And just to top off, arson investigation, I remember from your training that I attended of yours, it's just really difficult. And there's a lot of people who don't do it well, which is why a lot of these things don't get even picked up as crimes, and hence nobody's ever investigating these people, or it takes longer to get to the realization that you have a criminal who's active.
Precisely. Exactly. And there's a lot of problems in this profession. But like you said, we're trying to get better, but we deal with a lot of issues.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen, for a wonderful 90 minutes. It's just amazing to, as always, Gérard, to have such great people to chat to about such fascinating cases, and for us to break out of our African stories has been lovely as well. To bring an international bit of flavor to the channel. I'm just thankful of you guys taking the time. I'm thankful for everyone for watching. If you are a subscriber to the channel, if you've hit the like button, thank you very much. The bell will remind you when we are posting more episodes. Ed, thank you very much for joining us once again and taking the time. I'm sure we will make a plan to chat again and discuss more cases in the future, and we look forward to that. Gérard, thank you. I will see you again next week. I think I'm going to end it with, I know we're talking about serious stuff here, but Gérard says, thanks. Tonight's show was fire. And Marlene agrees it was totally lit. So there we go. Thanks, guys. Thank you for the interesting stream. Thanks, gents, for a very interesting episode. And with that, we're going to say goodnight to everybody out there, and we will be back next week. Thank you for tuning into Profiler Africa. And like I always say, guys, trust nobody, okay? Trust nobody.
My first mirror was scared.
This society deserves to be protected from me and from others like me.
They were sexual fantasies of control, power, complete dominance. They became reality.
This was scheduled today, so went to the garage. I got an X.
Shh. I closed my eyes.
Report suspicious activity.
I was crying so hard. And all of a sudden, he was there.
It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Dead won't bother you. It's the living you're going to worry about.
In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, knowing the minds of killers isn't curiosity, it's survival. Subscribe to Profiler Africa now. It's free. Or become a member and help keep the channel alive. Remember, trust nobody.